Around 1200 BCE, the ancient world was gently shaken by a cataclysm. Great cities fell, empires crumbled, and the Bronze Age, a golden age of trade, culture, and innovation, came to a sudden, quiet end. But what or who was responsible? From the Aegean to the Nile, from the Levant to Anatolia, there are clues, fragments of an ancient puzzle carved into temple walls and written in crumbling clay tablets. They whisper of mysterious invaders who came by sea, sacked cities, and vanished into history. Egypt called them the Sea Peoples, and ever since historians have tried to understand them. Who were they? Where did they come from? Were they a desperate coalition of displaced tribes or a wave of warriors driven by conquest? What forces carried them across the seas? Climate collapse, famine, war, or all the above? This is the story of those lost centuries, of how a confederation of peoples, largely anonymous, helped bring an entire era to its knees, and in doing so, gently reshape the course of civilization. To understand the Sea Peoples, we first need to understand the world they entered, the Eastern Mediterranean during the Late Bronze Age. It was a cosmopolitan age, remarkably interconnected. Empires flourished across the region, the Egyptians to the south, the Hittites in Anatolia, the Mycenaeans in Greece, and the Canaanite city-states along the Levant. Palaces and temples rose high, built on wealth that flowed through vast trade networks. Ships carried copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, ivory from Nubia, and grain from the Nile. Letters between kings reveal a diplomacy built on marriage alliances, tribute, and sometimes betrayal. This was not a primitive world. It was globalized, complex, and in many ways familiar, but it was also vulnerable. Entire economies relied on imported materials. Societies were hierarchical, ruled by elites who lived in luxury while peasants and soldiers bore the burdens. A series of droughts, earthquakes, plagues, or political miscalculations could, like dominoes, topple the whole system, and that is exactly what happened. The collapse began gradually, but the invasions were swift. Around 1200 BCE, destruction spread like wildfire. Ugarit, a bustling port in modern Syria, sent a desperate letter to its ally. "The enemy is near the gates. My ships are at sea. I cannot defend the city." That was the last letter it ever sent. Other cities, Ashkelon, Hazor, and Komi, suffered similar fates. The destruction was not random. It followed a pattern almost strategic. Coastal cities hit first, then inland capitals. In Egypt, Pharaoh Meneptah first recorded a group called the Sea Peoples attacking the Nile Delta around 1207 BCE. But it was under Ramses III, nearly 2 decades later, that the full onslaught came. He described a confederation of attackers with names like Peliset, Shurden, Shekelesh, and Denyen. They came with families and ox carts, suggesting they were not just raiders but migrants, entire peoples on the move. Ramses defeated them at the Battle of the Delta with a combination of archers and warships. His victory was commemorated in massive reliefs that still survive at Medinet Habu. But even in victory, Egypt was weakened, and the broader world had already changed. The Sea Peoples were not a singular culture. They were a coalition linked by purpose, not origin. Each tribe had its own language, symbols, and weapons. Scholars have debated their origins for centuries. The Shurden may have come from Sardinia. Their horned helmets resemble local styles. The Shekelesh may be connected to Sicily. The Peliset? Many scholars believe they were the Philistines, later described in the Hebrew Bible as enemies of the Israelites. Others, like the Denyen, might be tied to the Greek Danans. The Luka were likely from southwestern Anatolia. These people shared something in common. They lived along the periphery of great empires. When those empires began to falter, these groups, some former allies or mercenaries, turned to conquest or migration. Why did they move? Perhaps famine gripped their homeland, perhaps climate changes ruined their crops, earthquakes were frequent, and trade disruptions left many without means to survive. What followed was a domino effect of desperate movement, opportunistic warfare, and societal collapse. By 1150 BCE, the world of the Bronze Age was gone. The Hittite Empire vanished. Mycenaean Greece entered a dark age. Cyprus was devastated. The great cities of Canaan became shadows of themselves. Writing systems disappeared. Literacy declined. Monumental architecture ceased for centuries. Trade routes were abandoned, and iron slowly replaced bronze in weaponry. A new era was dawning, but slowly and gently. Even Egypt, the mighty kingdom of the pharaohs, survived in name only. Its economy suffered, the central authority weakened, tombs were robbed, bureaucrats turned to corruption. The old order had collapsed, and in its place rose new peoples, new gods, and new languages. The Sea Peoples didn't just break cities, they broke the system itself. Yet these mysterious invaders did not vanish. Many settled the very lands they once raided. The Philistines, now the Philistines, established 5 powerful city-states in Canaan: Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. They brought new styles of pottery, building techniques, and military tactics. Their cities were fortified and organized. Archaeology reveals their food habits included pigs, unlike their Israelite neighbors. Their deities, like Dagon and Ashtoreth, blended Aegean and Semitic traits. These were not nomads, they were builders, artists, and warriors. They adapted to their environment and coexisted, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not, with those already there. The Sherden and others may have blended into local populations in the Western Mediterranean. Sardinian bronze statues hint at cultural memory. Some sea peoples faded into myth, others into history. So what do we make of the sea peoples today? Their origins remain uncertain, their motivations debated. But one truth remains: they were a catalyst, a symptom and an agent of collapse. Some scholars now believe the sea peoples were not the root cause, but the final blow. A perfect storm of environmental decline, internal corruption, and fragile supply chains had set the stage. The Sea Peoples simply arrived at the tipping point. Others argue the Sea Peoples represent a historic lesson, that when elites fail their people, when climate shifts go unheeded, and when global systems are overstretched, collapse can come rapidly and violently. Yet their legacy also lives on in the cultures that emerged from the rubble. The Hebrews, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, all were shaped by this crucible of collapse and rebirth. The Sea Peoples may never be fully identified, but their impact is undeniable. They mark the end of one world and the birth of another. They were witnesses, participants, and survivors of one of the greatest transitions in history. Today, as we face climate shifts, mass migrations, and technological change, the story of the Sea Peoples reminds us no system is permanent. And in the face of crisis, those who adapt survive. Their ships may be gone, their names almost forgotten, but their echoes still crash upon our shores. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the ancient unknown. If you found this story captivating, like, subscribe, and share with fellow history enthusiasts. What do you think happened to the Sea Peoples? Tell us in the comments below. And remember, history isn't just about the past, it's a mirror to our present. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of our world.